Hi, I'm Ferie and you're in the stream. Today, the saying goes, beauty is only skin deep, but it's possible that the placement of your eyes, the shape of your mouth, or even the length of your chin may dictate every aspect of your life. Well, hello, good-looking audience. Welcome to The Beauty Show. Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, is looking out for your live feedback, and I'm just curious about that standard of beauty. Is it changes from all of our international audience online around the world? What do they think is beautiful?
I think it definitely differs depending on where you are. And what's interesting is that there are statistics to back up this idea that beauty matters, beauty pays. And what's really interesting, you'll see on my laptop here, is that all around the world, people are tweeting us from Zambia all the way to Saudi Arabia. People say that what matters most is that first impression. So we want to hear what you think about that as well. For those of you at home, tweet us your questions, your comments. Use hashtag AJStream.
And we will have more on the relationship between beauty and success in just a moment. But first, here's a look at some of the hashtags that we're keeping an eye on. Are there perks to being attractive? Studies show that physical looks determine the way you're treated by your parents, your path through school, and your financial success. And the overwhelming result, well, the better looking you are, the more you succeed. In the United States, for instance, the top third of attractive men earn 4% more than intellectually similar but average-looking men. In fact, being very good-looking in the top one-third earns you about $230,000 more over your entire lifetime. Tall people earn more, and for women, being blonde is the equivalent to an extra year of schooling. Now, to some, it may be a hard thought to digest, but consider this. Research says that we decide on whether we like a face or not in no more than 13 milliseconds. That's 30 times faster than a blink. On today's show, we discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of being good looking. So to help us do that, we're joined from Berlin by Daniel Hammermish. He is a professor of economics at Royal Holloway University of London and the author of Beauty Pays: Why Attractive People Are More Successful. From London, Cindy Jackson is a cosmetic surgery advisor, and from California, Juliana Brito-Swartz is a feminist blogger. So welcome to all of our guests, who all, as far as I'm concerned, are 10. But let's see how our international audience rates beauty. Daniel, don't laugh. You look great today. All right, so let's see how our international online community...
I've never been called a 10 before.
Oh, good. Well, I've peaked then for you. This is good. Maybe we should stop right here. All right, so Daniel, who's a 10, we'll come back to you in just a moment. But our international online community, they've been rating beauty as well. What are they coming up with?
Well, we actually asked them how they define beauty, and it differs from all around the world. Here are some of the responses that they sent to the stream.
Now, in America, it'd probably be blonde hair, blue eyes, thin features, and physically fit.
The definition of beauty is constructed by individual societies and cultures.
What color is someone's hair? What color is their skin? How thin are they?
If you think you're beautiful inside, it'll come out onto the surface, and everyone around you will think that you're beautiful too.
You're beautiful. We'll see if actually that's true or not.
All right, so Cindy Jackson, she is a cosmetic surgery expert, advisor. Cindy, on a scale of 1 to 10, what are you?
I'm the best I can be. I don't really go by the 1 to 10 scale, but my proportions are now correct, having used surgery, and every advantage we have in the modern technological world to up that number. And most people want to. Most people want to improve the way they look, and it's a basic human desire to look our best.
It'd be really good if we could work out between the three of us, the three guests, what is your idea of attractive and beautiful, so we can even have this conversation. What's your idea, Cindy, of what's attractive?
Well, it's not really an idea. It's more of a scientific research has proven that certain proportions are universally attractive, and this goes across cultures and any kind of learning or art training. You can't really do anything about it. We all have a primal template in our brains that we hold up to every person we meet. As you were saying, we decide in a split second whether or not we find that person attractive or whether we don't. And this is human nature because we're visual animals. Other animals, like the dogs, they go by smell, they go by size, and they work out who their peers are and what sort of other dogs they like. I mean, that's just an example. Not using looks, not using faces. Humans are unique in that respect.
I have to show people your website, and on your website you have a picture of you in 1979, a picture of you this year. There is a difference, a remarkable difference, and whatever you're having, I'd like some of that, because you seem to be getting younger, Cindy, over the decades. Yes. How did you do that?
It was a lot of research to begin with. I was an art student. I learned about classic proportion and Da Vinci's rules of beauty. When these artists in the Renaissance would create a beautiful statue or painting, they didn't just use arbitrary decisions about where they're going to put the nose, how big the space between the eyes should be. These are things that have been worked out for many, many, many centuries, and the criteria is still used today by plastic surgeons and people who are getting reconstructive surgery after an accident. They don't just guess how far apart everything should be and what a face should look like. They use these same standards.
Right.
So I use these for my face and body, and I made myself as technically correct as possible. And this is what I help other people with, because often people don't know what's really wrong with their face from their point of view, or what makes them look older, what makes them look less attractive, or if they have scars or they've been in an accident, they need to be correct, they have the correct surgery.
So Cindy, basically you did the research, you decided what was technically beautiful and balanced, and then you had the cosmetic surgery to fit that picture. Let's see what our audience is saying about that.
Well, in asking what is beautiful, a lot of our community is pretty skeptical. So Daniel, I want you to have a listen to this tweet. Simi writes in, attractiveness is subjective and to a large extent augmented by capitalist interests to sell products. It is very disempowering. But Daniel, you did the research on this, and you say it's more than just subjective.
It's subjective in some sense. I mean, you can't define it simply by saying certain proportions. I know one woman, proportions are perfect. A lot of people find her average. There's a certain, I don't know what to it. It's sort of like Justice Stewart's definition of pornography. I know beauty when I see it, you see it the same way, but you just can't define it. But the standards are international. You see advertisements for perfumes with models of African features, Asian features, and Nordic features, and they're all gorgeous. They're international agreements, but there's no simple definition. I wish there were.
See, Daniel, you say that, but there's a journalist who did a little project called the Before and After Project. Her name is Esther Hong. Have a look at what she did here, Daniel. It's a picture of her, and then she told all of the Photoshop artists around the world, just make me look cute, make me look beautiful. This is how she looked on this side here. This is the Photoshop version from India. So this is her photoshopped in India. This is a Morocco beautiful version of her. This is Chile. This is what a Chile Photoshopper would have done to make her look beautiful. Bangladesh. All of the pictures as they flash by. Pakistan here. Every version of beautiful is slightly different, Daniel. So maybe we don't have this universal idea of what's beautiful. Or does it not matter? Does it matter as long as you're in your part of the world, they think you're beautiful, you're going to get along there just fine?
I'm pretty sure, again, I can't prove it because there are very few studies that have compared across areas, the same people doing the ratings. But I've seen so much agreement looking at pictures, talking myself with people at international meetings that, again, it's not perfect. It's never going to be perfect. That means it is subjective. But it does exhibit a substantial amount of agreement. Not perfect, but substantial on this inherently subjective characteristic.
Juliana, you're looking uncomfortable about this conversation. It's something that when you hear the stats, when you hear how much more attractive men will earn over their lifetime just because they happen to have a well put together face. What's your take on that?
So I want to challenge the definition that we're using for beauty. I know that we had sort of tried to establish that in the beginning of the conversation, but I personally think that beauty is a way of judging people for things that have so much more to do, have to do with so much more than attractiveness, right? So I looked at those photos that you were just showing, and I saw a lot of differences, but one thing that I did notice is that very few of those women were made to look darker. Whiteness was definitely a theme that you see throughout those images. And I think that that's something that you could see internationally. Daniel, you mentioned that you can see sort of similar patterns of beauty across international groups, across, you know, African women and Asian women. And I would say that a lot of the time whiteness and class and gender play a really huge role in the way that we understand beauty. So it has a little bit less to do with just sort of scientific understandings of how attraction works, and a lot more to do with this societal construction of what beauty is and what is desirable in general for humans.
So Juliana, let me just bring in a couple of things that Malika and I tried out this lunchtime, reluctantly. Our producer made us do this. This is something called Anaface. It's www.anaface.com. We will tweet it out if you'd like to do this at home. Okay, so it gives you points around the face, bearing in mind that maybe being attractive is a symmetrical idea. So Malika did it earlier. And these are all the various points, you know, the distance between one eye and the other eye, and the distance of your nose and your nose relation to your face. And Malika's hating me right now. Okay, so Malika has a 7.89 out of 10, and here's why. So her face has got horizontal symmetry. The ratio of your nose, Malika, to your ear length is nearly ideal. And then what was wrong with you?
I learned so much.
Your mouth is too wide for your nose.
Exactly.
Did you know that?
Now I do.
All right.
Now I do.
So we've got one brown woman here, Juliana, so you'll be happy. Then another brown woman here. I got a 7.19 out of 10. Okay. All right, so I've got good horizontal symmetry. The ratio of my nose length to my ear length is nearly ideal. Okay, I know this by looking in the mirror every day. Your mouth is too wide for your nose. My mouth is too wide for my face, I think. It's a huge, huge, huge mouth. But I actually don't care. But the whole point of this conversation, Daniel, is that maybe we should care because there's a monetary impact that we have. I understand that even mums and schools treat better looking children differently. What have you found out about that?
Well, I think this does work that way. This goes throughout one's entire life. The sad fact is, as you can see by looking at me, we tend to look at older people as if they're not as good looking as younger people. And it's a good thing that older people have long-time jobs and don't need to use their looks to get jobs or to get a spouse. But there's no question this starts at day one. There's some very nice work on preschoolers who are treated differently depending upon their looks. This goes throughout our entire lives, and the effect, as you noticed, in terms of money, in terms of spouses, in terms of everything, is substantial. But you can't put your finger on the beauty. It's there, we know it, we all react within an instant. Right. But it's very hard to define it. That's the crucial point.
Well, Cindy, you heard Daniel say that this goes throughout our entire lives. Online, people are saying it continues into the workplace as well. So Mohammed says in Sweden, everybody's first priority is to look good going to their jobs. Looking handsome is as important as your qualification. On the other hand, JM says attractive people are given first priority in everything over their less attractive counterparts, including career opportunities. So have you seen that in your own experience? Do you think that you were treated differently today versus several years ago before your surgeries?
Absolutely. And I was a lot younger then, too. I did have youth on my side, but with the changes I've made to my face, I have a lot more opportunities and advantages, and other people find this too. I've seen so many people have such wonderful lives after getting rid of a burden on their face, such as a massive nose, that people would see the nose, they wouldn't see the person, and you let the inside come out. And this is what I try to help people do: match the inside to the outside to the inside. You can't overlook the person inside. So yeah, if someone is being held down by their looks, it affects their personality.
Juliana?
Can I interject there?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that though I do understand where you're coming from, I think that it's pretty problematic to suggest that that we are all beautiful people on the inside, hoping to sort of express our physical beauty as soon as it's released, right? That like our personality can sometimes not match how we look physically. I think that the problem is not that, say I thought that I was very ugly. I don't think that the problem is that I may be ugly on the outside. I think the problem is that we work in a society that judges people, and specific people more than others, based on how they look, and values them based on their bodies, not based on their intellect, their emotions, or anything but their face or body.
No, I disagree with that, because good looks can open doors, but it's up to you what you do when you get through the door. They're not everything.
Well, once through the door, Daniel, there's a question here on Twitter. I'll direct this to you. Alice says, I think the big question is who is doing the hiring? Is male perception more looks-based than female perceptions? Does gender matter?
No, men are having more and more surgery these days, too. Men care very much about their looks.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Let me try answering that. You would think it would matter tremendously whether it's the male or the female doing the hiring, and we know men do more of the hiring than women. Nonetheless, there have been a lot of studies where they have men and women rating the same faces, and they tend to rate them essentially the same. If you're good looking in the eyes of a man, let's say you're a woman, you'll be good looking in the eyes of a woman also. And I think we care equally, both genders, about looks. So I don't think the gender of the hirer matters very much at all. There's some evidence on that.
See, Daniel, what I find remarkable about what you've been doing is that we kind of felt instinctively, I think a lot of people kind of know that, nice-looking politicians do quite well. Pretty men, attractive women tend to do very well, tend to be quite successful. But you actually did the research. What made you, as an economist, go into this field? What's the point?
There are a number of reasons. First of all, the question, as you can tell from this show and many others, is inherently interesting to people. But second of all, look, our wages, what we make on the job, whether we get ahead, whether we get promoted, is an essential outcome in most of our lives. And here is something which has a substantial effect on that outcome. My point, though, and I think this is crucial to stress this, and I think your second speaker said this very, very nicely. Beauty is only one of many, many things that affects how successful we are. And I think it's crucial to stress to people that if we haven't got beauty, and certainly I don't, you've got to stress the things that you're good at and try to get ahead with them. And that's the way, A, to get ahead, and B, to be happy.
What about cosmetic surgery, Daniel? That's the route that Cindy has gone, and she's very comfortable with that route. Would you go as far to say that, knowing what you know about the workplace, that you can kind of up your beauty premium just a little bit?
Well, I thought about myself, and I asked the question, what could I do, not now, I'm 71, what could I have done 35, 40 years ago to help myself?
Yeah.
And the cosmetic surgeries necessary to bring me up to a 10 would have been something like the movie Face Off with John Travolta. It couldn't happen, it couldn't be done. Absolutely. Okay. But taking the less personal note, there are now two very nice studies that have actually looked at people before and after cosmetic surgery. And there's no question that people, A, felt better after cosmetic surgery, and B, they also looked younger. But the ratings of their beauty, not their age, not their perceived age, but their beauty, really didn't change in other people's eyes. They felt better about themselves, and that's the best argument for doing anything.
Wow.
Make yourself happy, go for it, I'd say.
So Daniel, they spent all that money, but other people still felt they were kind of the same standard of looking, attractiveness.
I see no problem with that. I spend money on my nice ties and my clothes, and I don't think it makes me more attractive, but I feel better about myself, and that's the most important reason for doing anything.
I think Daniel's making an interesting point there, if I can jump in.
Yeah.
On the one hand, I would agree with you that it is up to the individual. If that's something that makes you feel better, certainly we live in a society that does really value beauty, and I think it's really understandable to do that. That being said, I do think that it puts the onus on some communities more than it does others. in order to feel good about themselves, right? So I think that women, on the one hand, are left to think that perhaps cosmetic surgery is the only way they can feel good about themselves. People who may have darker skin, bigger, less white noses, are left to worry about that more than others. So I think that we really need to challenge, instead of how can all those people reach this sort of white, very limited ideal of what beauty is, why don't we challenge why it is that our understanding of beauty is so narrow?
But while we're challenging that, Juliana, is it possible that they could be losing out on promotions and actually being able to get better jobs because we're still coming to terms with maybe what our talent is doesn't have to be about how good looking we are?
That is possible, yeah. And I think that on an individual basis, it's up to each person to decide what works best for them.
Sure.
But I do think we need to complicate this conversation.
I understand. Monica.
I'm going to complicate it a little bit more. Cindy, I want to play you a video comment from someone who says, though while this may be true, things could be changing. Have a listen to this.
Good looking is a set of skills. It's how you dress, it's how you do your makeup, it's how you do your hair. It's a lot of time and effort. Pretty is also a finite amount of money that one spends to maintain these skills, which is naturally going to privilege some groups above others. Male employers who have said that I am pretty, it made them just listen to me 5 seconds longer than normal. Older female employers that have told me that I'm pretty tend to act more protective of me, so I count that as a positive. Does it equal greater career success? Probably. But for my generation in this job market, I don't think pretty is going to get us as far as it might have a couple years ago.
Cindy, I'm curious your thoughts on that. Do you think that it is a generational shift that we're seeing?
No, I think evolution moves a lot slower than that. This is what we are as human beings. It's a biological imperative, and it doesn't change within a generation. And I also think cosmetic surgery is a great leveler. If you have been born with less than beautiful looks, you can buy them now. And why should, just because you lost out on the genetic lottery doesn't mean that you can't do something about it. It means you can also join that group if you have the money and you're brave.
So Daniel, you looked at whether more attractive people did better in the workplace. Is there a downside to can you be too attractive in the workplace? Is that possible?
The term I use to describe that phenomenon is the bimbo effect, that people think that if some woman is so good looking it'll hurt her. There is very little evidence on that. In fact, quite the contrary. Almost all the evidence except for one study suggests that every increase in beauty you do better.
Right.
So I just don't think that's true in general and not even in specific. It's a really minor phenomenon. We'd like to tell ourselves that, oh, this gorgeous person's unhappy and doing badly, and you know what? It just isn't so.
What about the himbo effect? It doesn't have to be women that are too beautiful. What about guys? Like some guys can be really, really unattractively attractive. Like way too much going on. Is that possible?
Again, the evidence again suggests that given everything else, your education, your age, where you live, that looks just help you. Help you going from bad looking to average, from average to good looking, from good looking to gorgeous even.
Wow.
George Clooney, we'd all like to look for him. I think I'd do better. I'd get a higher salary as a professor if I'd looked like George Clooney, I'm quite sure.
Okay, on that note, let's go to the community, see what the community have to say about this conversation.
Well, I will leave us with this tweet. It's an interesting idea that we can pick up in the post-show. Ali says, I think that there should be a law to protect us Shreks. And he's, of course, referring to the Disney, the Pixar character, who is an ogre, really.
Okay. All right. I love that. We have on our lineup for our guests who are going to the post show with us, Juliana Britta-Schwartz, he's a feminist blogger, Cindy Jackson, who's a cosmetic surgery advisor, and Daniel Hammermesh, he's an economy professor who would like to look like George Clooney, but he looks how he looks, and I think he looks just fine. He's from the Royal Holloway University of London. He's also coming to stream.aljazeera.com in just a moment. Let me just tell you about our next AJ stream. Having to travel hundreds of miles to get an abortion. Now that's the reality for many in the United States as new state regulations close clinic doors. Proponents say it's to protect women's health. Critics say it's an attempt to end abortion rights. We will discuss this on the next AJ stream. Until then, see you online. Hello again, this is the Streams Post Show. We're going to get right back to our conversation. We're talking about beauty and the connection to doing well, particularly financially well. Daniel, I want to come back to you because when we were chatting about this show in our office, we reeled off a lot of people who may not be as good looking as George Clooney, but were incredibly successful. How do you account for like the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and also Bill Gates and Stephen Hawking's, and then the list goes on and on and on. Now, I actually think they are good-looking guys. I think they look fine. My crew were like, ooh, not so much. They said, I think, what did they say? They look like British men. Anyway, look, back to that point about maybe
answers.
Yeah, you don't have to be attractive to be successful. Maybe those two things aren't as linked as you think they are.
There's so many things that make you successful. Brains, physical ability, a good singing voice, a good personality. Attractiveness, beauty is just one of many, many things that matters. Getting educated matters, being able to deal with people. And as I said, if you haven't got the looks, emphasize the things you are good in. Your intelligence, your strength, your musical ability. Look, I can't sing, I can't carry a tune, but it hasn't hurt my career because I don't have to sing for my career.
Sure.
And again, you can go across the board on that. All these other things matter too.
There were some parts of the world which I understand were beginning to recognize that there was this definitely beauty premium and that maybe we should try and, Cindy says, level the playing field via cosmetic surgery, but could there be maybe a beauty tax? Have you heard about that in parts of the world where they're thinking this is a real thing and people are earning less money because they're not as comely looking?
Well, it's been proposed. I mean, there was a proposal. Sorry, there was a proposal for a beauty tax in Argentina. Alternatively, one could offer affirmative action for ugly people. And the way we do now for minorities of various kinds. Whether you want to do that, that's a political question. But it would have the impact of helping the ugly and putting them on a more even footing with the good looking.
Cindy?
What happens if you lose your looks through an accident or old age? I mean, and who's going to also arbitrate who's ugly and who's beautiful, and what level of tax they'd be? I mean, I think it's ridiculous, to be honest. How can you tax somebody on the way they look? Because we can all have bad hair days and not have our off days, and then so do you get a break on those days or what?
I think I should get a raise every bad hair day.
Oh, clearly,
Juliana, go ahead.
I think what I would say, I also agree that sounds a little bit ridiculous, but I would say that there are, because I've already argued that beauty is largely attached to issues of race, and I also think it's very well intertwined with class. You know, Cindy, you've talked about how cosmetic surgery can serve as a way of evening the playing field, but the reality is that that's very expensive, right? And cosmetic surgery can stand in for lots of other things. I think that being beautiful takes time that a lot of people can't afford. I think that, you know, buying all the makeup that you need, taking the time to make your hair look this one or wear that, has a lot to do with how much money and time that you have. So I think that if we want to sort of support people who are quote unquote ugly, we could invest in other sort of social safety net programs.
You know,
well, who'd want to be seen in that program, though?
Go ahead, Cindy.
Who'd want to be seen in that program? I mean, that's insane. I think beautiful people should also not be discriminated against, whether or not they bought the beauty or they were born that way.
Oh, I don't mean a program for the beautiful. I mean,
let's hold on first.
Go ahead, Daniel.
Go ahead.
Let's hold on first. Let me interrupt. Let me hold on for a second. Now I hear the term beautiful people discriminated against. No, they're discriminated in favor of. All one might propose, and I don't advocate this for political reasons.
They were talking about a beauty tax and then giving extra advantages.
Yes, exactly,
to people
but it's
not beautiful. So that's discrimination, no?
But that's no, it's not. It's reversing what an uneven playing field that our natural reactions toward looks have created. Now, what I'd like to see is I view the whole beauty thing as something left over from the jungle, from the days of the past, when beauty was an indication of health, and for reproductive reasons, it was evolutionarily valuable. But it's not anymore. Ugly people are just as reproductively fit as good-looking people. And for that reason, we're living in an outdated world. Just as you said earlier, Cindy, it takes time, more than one generation, for attitudes to change. But I look forward to the day when beauty just doesn't matter very much anymore in the workplace or in getting loans or in marriages. But that day is a long ways away, regrettably, as we all agree.
weighing in on this conversation. Some on Twitter says the benefit one receives from being perceived as being attractive outweighs the detriment. But Daniel, I want to direct this next one to you because Akash has an interesting idea. He says financially successful people can afford to spend more on looking attractive physically. So this could really be vice versa. The opposite is true. Do you think that that plays a role in it?
Well, you know, you can say that, but you could also say, look, I'm gorgeous already, so why should I spend my money on making myself more gorgeous? I already have it. It's not clear which way it goes. The one bit of evidence I have on that suggests that, in fact, the beauty causes the money, and there's very little reverse causation. So it's possible, but it doesn't seem consistent with the way the world works.
Daniel, what's the most...
I would disagree with that.
Yeah, go, yeah, and? Go ahead.
I would say that if you think about, for example, the way that right now it's really very fashionable to be thin, correct? That's because being thin actually takes a lot of time. It takes time to go to the gym. Gyms are expensive to afford. You have to be able to afford really healthy food, which a lot of people can't. So that it's actually low-income people have higher rates of obesity. But if you look back, you'll see old European paintings of women who are quite overweight. And by our standards of beauty, we do not find them attractive. But back then, being able to eat more than you needed in order to stay, you know, overweight like that was financially difficult to do. And so it really was an indicator of wealth. And I would argue that that's still absolutely applicable to the way that we see people today.
Daniel, out of all of your research, what was the most surprising piece of evidence that you found that actually made you sit up? I was surprised that children's own parents discriminated against their own children. That I found very upsetting. What actually made you sit up when you did your research?
I think the thing that surprises me the most, and it seems to surprise the average reader of my book and of the evidence in the newspapers, is that beauty has effects on men, at least in terms of their success economically, just as much, if not more, than it does on women. This really seems to surprise people. But beauty and our reactions to it, in some sense, is gender neutral in terms of its overall effects. This is a problem for all of us, and guys, believe me, I was in high school once, guys are just as concerned about their looks, albeit in different ways, as women are. We all know that from our high school days.
How do we beat this? If we don't consider ourselves to be a 10 or not anywhere near a 10, how do we then, okay, go, this happens universally around the world. How do we get through that? How do we make that not as important, Daniel?
Again, try to make yourself good along those criteria, those dimensions that you have something to offer, be it brains, personality, strength, whatever. Again, the beauty or the lack of it's always going to hurt you. I mean, what can you do about it? You're stuck with it to a very large extent. You're born genetically, as they've said. But you can still try to emphasize the positive, the things that count that you're good at. That's all one can hope for. And there's so many other things that matter, beauty being just one of them.
Cindy, you more than leveled the playing field as far as you were concerned. You feel much happier how you look now than how you did back in the 1970s. What would you tell people who actually feel that they are being discriminated against because they're not as good looking as their peers? What do you think they should do?
Well, if they want to have surgery, I'm all for it. Obviously, it worked for me. It works for a lot of people. But what Daniel said was also true. You know, you do need other attributes and other talents and other aspects of your personality. But the good looks can be just the icing on the cake, and everybody can benefit.
Final word from Juliana.
I mean, I have no judgment on whatever individuals choose to do with their own bodies. I think that we do need to continue to challenge why it is that our standards of beauty work this way, though.
Juliana, Cindy, Daniel, thank you very much for joining us on this conversation. And let's see what the community is saying.
I'll leave you with this from Aditi, and she says, you know, she's been listening to these facts throughout this show. She says it's problematic because it means only a certain class can afford to solve a socio-cultural phenomenon.
Okay, thank you very much, community. Thank you to all of our guests. Meanwhile, what will we be doing on the next AJ stream? Well, on the next show, should an unborn fetus have a lawyer when a girl under the age of 18 wants to have an abortion? We'll tell you why one US state says yes. Until then, I'll see you online. Thanks for watching.